Now, according to new reports, the United States is preparing to send a warship into the Black Sea amid increased tensions between Ukraine and Russia. Meanwhile, the Russian Ministry of Defense says troops in eastern Crimea are conducting military drills. Kiev says commercial shipping has resumed in the Sea of Azov, but relations are still strained. Now, last month, 3 Ukrainian ships were detained in the Kerch Strait of Crimea after Russia claims the ships violated territorial waters. Ukraine called the incident an act of aggression and declared martial law in border territories. For more, we turn to Professor of International Human Rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law and author of the book, The Plot to Control the World, How the U.S. Spent Billions to Change the Outcome of Elections Around the World. Thanks for joining me, Dan.
Thank you.
So, Dan, as we speak, U.S. warships are making preparations to sail into the Black Sea amid Russian-Ukraine tensions. Do you think the U.S. is risking direct military confrontation with Russia at this point?
Well, I think that is a big risk. You know, could you imagine if a Russian warship were sailing, you know, in waters off the coast of Florida? The U.S. would be in a panic over that. This is a very aggressive move by the United States, and we have to remember Trump just announced that he's going to back out of the intermediate range nuclear missile treaty that was signed in 1987. The U.S. has been recently arming the regime in Ukraine, which has elements that are openly Nazi. Russia has every reason to feel intimidated by these actions, and this is just another move to make Russia feel on edge.
Well, that's the thing, Dan. What do you think is the overriding objective right now of the U.S. here of the recent U.S.-NATO maneuvers, as well as including other countries trying to get involved? And even though you had Germany and other countries last week at the G20 state, they weren't going to have anything to do with it.
Yeah, well, I think Europe is worried because they've seen what a world, you know, a major war looks like on their soil. The U.S. has really never experienced that. I mean, one has the impression that the U.S. may want some sort of military conflict with Russia. You know, I think if you look at the world economy, it's in free fall at this point. And there may be folks in the U.S. who think that the only way to dig out of it is to have a major conflict. I would obviously be horribly fearful of that and opposed to that, but I suspect that could be happening.
Well, it's interesting because, like I said, like you mentioned, we are only 48 hours into definitely a tough day in the markets after having an amazing day on Monday. So it'll be interesting to see if this long-term covers over into next week. You are usually very critical of nature of the regime in Ukraine, which you write is comprised, and you just mentioned, openly Nazi political groups. So how significant is this in terms of regional implications, even if you take the U.S. out of it?
Well, it's huge. I mean, first of all, to have the specter of fascism and Nazism in Europe is quite frightening for everyone in that region, and especially for Russia, that lost 27 million people in the fight against the Nazis. Meanwhile, we see news reports that these Nazis in Ukraine have been actually training neo-Nazi militias in the United States. So I think all of us have something to fear from this. And we have to remember that the U.S. in 2014 was very critical in helping install that regime in Ukraine. And yet there seems to be very little concern about the nature of that regime. And again, that it seems to be openly Nazi, that it's been calling openly for ethnic cleansing of Jews and ethnic Russians from Ukraine. It's quite frightening, and I think that it could lead to some type of conflagration in that area.
Well, anti-Semitism is on the rise, but let's hope that we remember what happened in World War II and not try to repeat it. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.